Hey everyone, so welcome to another Surnames interview with an HMS expert. So today we have Matt Singers, and he's a people management consultant that builds teams and companies. He has spoken at lots of events such as CMSU and have been in the world of SEO since 2007. He's also the host at the SEO Mastery Summit, right, Max?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a pleasure to meet you, man. So how are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. Currently hanging out with some friends in the US and yeah, having a good time here.
Yeah, really good, really good. Like I'm really excited to shoot this interview and share some knowledge about age domains. Like you can share your insights, right? So
Yeah.
okay. So let's get started. So I have prepared some questions and we can just go through them one by one. So let's start with the main question. So why not you just share your experience of age domains with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, generally I've been in SEO, as you said initially, since 2007, right? So I've built quite a few sites. Generally mostly sort of affiliate sites, content sites, and so on. Um, Generally my experience generally with domains have probably gone back to about 2014, 15 when we started buying. Initially, we were buying H domains for PBNs. However, we don't really do that a lot anymore. We use them a lot more for money sites nowadays. Particularly, I mean, starting a new site on a brand new domain is an uphill battle nowadays, right?
Yeah,
Like if you really want to start a brand new site today, like generally I mean, there's ways to get around it, but fundamentally, for most people, if you're starting out in SEO or if you have a little bit of experience, it will take you quite a while before you start making decent money, right?
yeah.
So basically, for me, H domains basically helps you shortcut that process. So you both have the benefit of the age from the domains, but
Mhm.
more importantly, you also have the big linking benefits, right? And if you're buying and ranking sites nowadays, fundamentally you spend a lot of time and resources in terms of really acquiring links, right? So whatever
Yeah,
you have a
yeah,
linked over theme or whatever, like buying links is expensive, right? And if
yeah.
you can find an expired domain or an auction domain or whichever with a good link profile and lots of good links on it, you can save many, many, many thousands of dollars and time in acquiring those links, right?
Yeah, so yeah, that's fantastic, man. Like glad to hear your story. So there are couple of questions I have. I can ask what's the best strategy you use right now with the instruments?
I mean, there's many good strategies to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I think fundamentally, I mean, both buying age domains, but also buying age sites. All right. So I mean, we love buying up competitors, particularly if we see small sites doing really well in terms of ranking and in terms of traffic. Because if you merge sites together, you often get a huge benefit. All right. Because if you have a site that have a good DR or good links to it, and you actually buy a much smaller site and merge them together, you often get a big benefit out of it, right? So that's one of the strategies that we really enjoy where we're buying up competitors and so on. So that's a lot of fun.
Okay, so when you mention about age websites, so are they are they built on age domains or they are just on new domains?
I mean, generally, any sites we have are either sites that, I mean, we also buy sites sometimes that are uh, that have existing particularly good content, right? So we love buying existing sites and so on. So it doesn't really matter if it's in H domains or if it's on new domains. If it's sites doing well, if you have sites with very few links doing really well, if you merge them into a site that have a lot of links, the site will generally do significantly better, right? So
Yeah,
you can basically use the whole link power to gain much bigger benefits. And what I typically say, if you have two sites each making 1 grand each, like merging them will often make the two of them make 3K together just because you have the benefit of the authority, as long as they're a similar niche and all that good
yeah,
stuff,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, because I recorded the first interview with Mushfiq, and he also mentioned he loves buying websites and growing them using 301 or something like that, right? So yeah, I think that's a pretty cool strategy, and people can use it, right? So, Max, as
Yeah.
you know, age domains are like getting really popular these days, and like everyone is looking to acquire, right? But most of them have this fear, age domains, like they don't work every time, or like if they work, they are not very good for long-term rankings, right? So, what do you think about it? What's
Yeah,
your insight?
that's definitely a few things to look out for. So a couple of the things we check. Obviously, if you have an existing domain, what you
Hmm.
want to check is specifically that the anchor text actually makes sense. So if I don't actually mind if a domain has been used as a PBN at some point.
Hmm.
That's often less of an issue for me. I'm much more concerned about the actual anchor text going to the site. So
Hmm.
if you see the number like in the top three, if you see that 20% of the anchor text is something with porn or gambling or something totally irrelevant to the domain, that's
Hmm.
generally a red flag. All right. So what you have to think about if you're using a domain or if you're tier oneing it to a different site, the key thing to think about is the fact that what are those anchor texts gonna do to your site. So if you're building a new site around gardening and you have a whole bunch of anchor text around porn or about casino or gambling or you know fashion designer bags or something, they're gonna mess up what your site's about. All right,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
you wanna avoid those. All right, so anchor text is the number one thing we look at. The second thing is have the site actually had traffic in the past? So have Google at some point liked this domain and granted it traffic. If it have, that's a really good sign. Now, if it's an expired domain, you have to think about the fact that many people go in and remove 404s. So you might have a domain that used to have 1,000 links. Now it have 200 links. So it might not be as powerful as it used to be. But if
hmm,
those links that have are still good links,
hmm,
and it can still be workable, right? But we love if Google have loved the domain in the past, that's probably number one, right? So have it have previous traffic on that domain. Does it have good anchor text and does it have good links? And I mean, DR gives you an indication, but really
yeah,
what you want to look at is what are the do follow links going to the site, all right? And
yeah.
we love it if we generally can have 50 plus DR 50 plus links to a
Hmm.
page, do follow links. That's generally something we look at and we're generally interested in, right? So we're looking at do follow links primarily, and we are looking at generally DR 50 plus because those are the links that are harder to acquire if you get in yourself. Now, ideally, we want to see some links in the high 80s and 90s because those are the links that are typically really expensive. So if we
Yeah.
have a domain with 4 or 5 of those links, that's definitely great. What we look at then next is we go and look at archive, and what we're really interested in archive is to see if the domain in the past have been trio one. Because
Okay.
what
Yeah.
we've found is if a domain in the past have been trio one for more than 6 months, generally it looks like the value of that domain have been moved to the domain it was trio one to, and therefore the benefit of you actually using that domain is very, very little. So that's generally what we look for in archive. We also obviously look in archive to see like exactly what was the type of content that was on the page in the past and so on. And because what you want to do is you want to make sure you have new content that matches that sort of intent or that's very
Yeah.
similar to the
Relevancy.
previous content. As I said, we generally don't mind if sometimes there've been Chinese text on it or the domain have been used as a PBN. As long as the anchor text have not been screwed up, then it doesn't actually seem to matter much, right? So what we would typically do though is we would go back and create content that matches the original intent of the domain. And what we normally always do is we make sure the domain ranks first. So if we buy a domain, whatever the purpose is with it, we will usually put some content that matches what was on it originally, just to make sure that it get indexed and that it's all working. Now, sometimes you might buy a domain and you realize that there's a penalty on it. And if that's the case, you can actually go in and you can actually request to get a penalty lifted and just, just play dumb and say, hey, I just bought this domain, but it looks like it's not showing up in Google or whatever. The two most typical domains penalties is either link spam, which means it's got basically spammy links going to it. If that's the case, we've found sometimes just actually saying, hey, I just bought this domain, blah, 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 actually get the penalty lifted. Occasionally that's not the case. What we have actually found is that when we ask to get it lifted, if we just leave it for a few months, even if they decline, we have actually sometimes seen the penalty just get removed.
Okay.
So, because we buy a lot of domains and we often apply for them to get, sometimes we get some with penalties, and sometimes when we have seen these penalties, we've literally just waited for a few months, and then sometimes they've just been removed, even though they actually declined the request to remove the penalty originally. So if it's a content penalty, there's a few different content penalties. So one of them we've seen quite a bit is the sort of duplicate spammy content. So that's either sites that are taking a lot of content from RSS or the likes. And if that's the case, we literally just remove all content that's on the page. We have a brand new installation, and we basically just make a front page that is unique content. And we then see if that content get, indexed and so on. And then we request to get the content penalty removed. And again, we just say, hey, we just bought this domain, I want to build this website. It looks like it's not getting indexed, and just play stupid kind of thing, right? And see what they say. So.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. Like you have we can I also prefer, like, if the domain has traffic, then it's a really good signal that Google prefer that domain. And also I also prefer, like, if the domain has lots of high authority to follow backlinks, right? So yeah, this is something I also look for, right? And so Matt, like you mentioned about expired domains, and like people have this confusion, like they talk about expired domains and they use the term as auction domains and then some as age domains. So like, what do you think? Like, what are the difference, or are they or same for you?
Honestly, I don't see a huge difference. So auction domains, so domains that haven't expired, pretty much work 99 to 100% of the time if you know how to work with them. All right. Expired domains have a higher likelihood of not working, both because you can, like, for example, you can't always see an archive if the domain have been 301 in the past. All right. So stuff can happen. But I mean, honestly, we've bought domains that have been expired for 15 years and still work great when they've been redone up. Right. So expired domains can definitely still have a ton of value, right? I'd say if you're just starting out, you might be better with the auction ones that haven't expired, but fundamentally both of them work. I mean, the whole thing is it's the same thing. They both have links, right? So if it's the right links, if they haven't been 301, and if the anchor texts are decent, and you know how to work with the domains and get relevant content on them and so on, my experience generally is that they work, right?
Okay, so we just have to look at the metrics, like all the links and all, and it doesn't matter like the domain is expired or aged, right? Okay, that's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
I mean, the success rate, obviously, if you have a domain that haven't expired, the success rate is higher, right? Like sometimes for whatever reason, an expired domain doesn't work, right? But obviously, when you look at it from a cost perspective, you often pay 3 to 5, sometimes 10 times more for a similar domain being not expired to a domain being expired, right? So I would say it this way: if I can get 10 domains that are expired at the same quality as a auction one that haven't expired, I would pick the 10 non-expired because overall they would bring more value.
Yeah, right. Because I feel like the most good domains, they just do directly into the auctions, right? And they get sold for thousands of dollars. But for the expired domain, they are basically those domains which you can register for normal registration price, and they usually have no good links and all, right? So that's why, like, these days people are just
It depends. I mean, that if you have a really good expired domains, they can also get quite expensive. But it's still, as I said, it's somewhere between a third to a tenth less than a
Yeah,
non-expired domain. So it's
yeah,
definitely less. Now, a lot of people again are hooked on metric, right? So
yeah,
sometimes if like what we actually look at when we look for domains is we look at do follow links in href. And we find a lot of sites that are maybe DR1 or DR5 or something that are really good that we buy just because most people don't look at them. So the challenge is if you have a domain that's DR30 or DR50, even if it's expired, there's lots of people looking at it and bidding at it, but most people are too hooked on the DR metric and they're not looking at the
yeah, right. And it's
actual
actually,
backlink that the site has.
yeah, yeah, that's right, that's right. Yeah, because like backlinks are the most important thing, right? Like you just don't need to like trust the DR and all, right? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, a DR can give you a good indication, but
Mhm.
you need to look at the links, right? I mean, all metric. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's DR or anything else. They can all be manipulated somehow, and there's certain links. Like just because a site is DR30 doesn't mean it have any good links. Like you can have a DR30 site with no links about DR50, right?
Yeah, right, yeah, right.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's right. So, so Matt's like, like there are many people who are purchasing expired domains or say age domains, right? And most of them could not get success, right, for some reason. So, if you are going to like share some advice, like, so what do you think? Like, what usual mistakes people do, which lead to the failure of their project?
Right. So a few things, right? I mean, I recently bought a content company, and the
Okay.
reason for it is because we produce a lot of content. We were buying 500,000 plus words a month, right? So I ended up buying a new content company, and what we've seen a lot is that I mean we invest quite a bit in content, and if we buy an expired domain, we put content on it, fundamentally, if for whatever reason it doesn't work out, what we tend to do is eventually, I mean, if we give it a few months and we see nothing happens, we literally just trio one it to another expired domain. So we literally just move the entire site to another expired domain and basically use that domain instead. Because that way it's basically just like making a brand change or a domain name change, just to another expired domain. And it's rare that we would have two domains that have gone through our process that where two of them isn't working, right? So typically that's what we would do. So if we're seeing after a few months that we're not seeing the typical lift off that we get with an expired domain, we would literally just trio one the whole site, page by page, to a different expired domain or auction domain or whatever.
Okay, so like if you like 301 and in that case as well, if the site doesn't get picked up, so what do you do? Have you seen such case yet?
Where both of them doesn't work.
Yeah.
I don't think we've had a case like that though.
Okay. I think like this is something people can do. Like if they are like struggling with age domain and they are not getting result, like they can move their website to another age domain and see how things work.
Honestly, where most people go wrong is that they don't go through the criteria as well enough. Like they either see a domain with good DR, or
Okay.
they get a domain that isn't getting indexed for whatever reason, or the domain have been 301 in the past, or like that's usually one of those things that haven't been done correctly. Or again, as I said, the anchor texts are totally fucked up or something. So there's usually one of those things that are wrong if people are not succeeding with it.
Yeah. So and I've seen also like people don't put a lot of content and they just decide or they just give up before that, right? So like according to you, like how much content you prefer to put on the domain to test it?
Well, the more the better, because reality is if it doesn't work, we're gonna 301 it, or we're gonna put it somewhere else. So, I mean, honestly, like I know a lot of people that are like, okay, let's put 5 articles and see what happens.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I
I've
mean,
seen
we
that.
do it the other way around. We buy domains and we then decide, okay, we want to make a website in the home improvement niche or whatever. We do the keyword research from scratch. We know what the site's going to look like. We push I mean, we build the content, we order content for the future month and so on straight away. And then if for whatever reason it doesn't work out and we don't see big liftoff, then we literally just 301 the page and we keep pushing new content out, right? So we always go in with the assumption that it will work, and I would say in most cases it does work for us, right? So it's about, you need to find domains that are good enough, right? I mean, sometimes I see people buying a domain with 2 links or something. And I mean, the domain age in itself is also helpful. But if you want significant liftoff when you start pushing content, you need to find domains that have plenty of links, right?
So speaking of a good domain, like how many do follow links you prefer? Like the minimum limit you have?
But so as I said, we like to have, basically when we look in Ahrefs, we would like to have 50 links that are above the 50.
Okay.
That's a great domain, right? I mean, sometimes you might have 30 and that will still work, but when we're starting up a new site, at least, we like to have 50 links above the 50 that are do follow.
Okay, that's quite nice. Like that must be a strong domain, because I've seen people have like this budget of $100 or $200, but usually like they can't get such domains, right?
Right, and I mean those domains you typically end up paying a bit of money for, right? If you have less money, you can definitely work with less. The whole concept is the same, though, right? Like if I had less money, I would try and find domains that have somewhere between maybe 5+ the 80+ links, and solid links, right? Like not from. I mean, there's a few sites out there, the 85+ that are not great, not the best, right? But if you have links from like big newspapers, so if you can find a page, an old domain that have links from like BBC and 4 or 5 of the big newspapers, like that's definitely a start, because those are the kind of links that are very, very hard to get by yourself, right? So if you can get 4 or 5 of those links on an H domain, then yeah, I mean you can still do great things, but obviously the more links, the more value, right?
Yeah, it's like if you get a better domain, then you will have a better chance of success, right? So yeah, it's a business, then you
Yeah,
have to take the
I
risk.
think honestly, like in most cases, unless your domain doesn't get indexed, like even if you buy a domain that have a few links, like you're probably better off than not having it at all. All right.
Yeah.
But obviously, with all websites, you need content, and that there's so many good keyword strategies nowadays where you can find very easy to rank for keywords that are great, right? I mean, we've recently started using a new tool called WriterSen, and they have this all in title search that is absolutely fantastic at finding sort of particularly longer tail keywords that are very easy to rank for, right? So but reality is out there that there's a ton of methods of finding easy keywords. And when you start any site, like when we start a site on an expired domain, the number one thing we want is traffic, right? So we love having some keywords that bring in some quick traffic, right? Like we don't start with, if we start a garden site, we don't start with searching for best lawnmower or something like that, right? Because even with a great domain, that's still not going to bring in much traffic because it's a very competitive keyword, right? But if you start going down in the long tails and, cool lawnmower for a small piece of grass in New Hampshire or something, if you go into some of those longer tail funny keywords that have searches and so on, right, you will get some traffic, and that's very important in the beginning.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like you're starting with some long tail keywords, right? So Mans, like you were sharing some really good tips on writing the domain. So like, do you also check if the domain was dropped in the past or not?
If it was dropped, what's it?
Yeah. Like if it was a drop domain, like if it has a like drop history or something.
Not really. I mean, to be honest, we just really look at if it have been 301 in the past. For me, that's the most important piece, because I mean, Google have been out and saying that basically the same. If you do 301s, right, like you don't need to keep a 301 forever. If it had been more than a year, if the domain expires or whatever, that's fine. The whole value is still moved across to the new domain. What you don't want to do is you don't want to pick up that domain, all right? Because so here's the thing. We say that if you're building link posting farms that I know a few people are doing, those domains can work well because they will make your Ahref score look good and they'll make your numbers look good.
I've seen that, yeah.
But they just won't work from a links perspective, in my experience, right? So they'll like in the various tools, they'll make you look good. So if you have a domain that you have traffic on and you just want to increase the DR to charge more money from guest posts, like you could use some cheap domains like that to increase your DR a lot. But,
yeah, you can free zone the domains. Yeah, you can free zone the domains to increase the DR. So that's a like very manipulative way, but yeah, it works, right? Do you also check the domains in Google Search Console? Because I have seen sometimes any H domain, like if I check in Google Search Console, then it doesn't show any backlinks. Have you seen like that? Something like that?
We only check in Google Search Console if it doesn't get indexed, to be honest. So if a domain isn't getting indexed, if we put up a new domain, an old domain, if it doesn't get indexed, then we usually add it to Search Console and check it. But we don't do that with all domains.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. Because someone told me if you're buying an H domain and if you don't see any backlinks into the Google Search Console, then it means Google has not indexed those backlinks and the domain won't work. I don't know how true is that because I have not tested it yet. So, but
that's possible. That's possible.
But is it also possible Google is not showing backlinks right now? Or maybe Google is not showing backlinks, but the domain will work out.
That's speculation, but I mean it's not something we normally check, but that it's very possible, and I don't know.
Okay, yeah. So let's move to the other set of questions. So these are based on using the HTML for money website. So people have this big question, how do they maximize the effect of HTML? How they can just recover the link juice, and how can they just get the best out of the HTML? So what's your advice on it?
Yeah. So one thing I would say in using H domains for money sites, if you start a site, if you have a domain that sounds like shit but it have the right links, you start it on the expired domain. And what you can do, or the H domain, right? Now, what you can do is after you get it ranking and after you get it working okay, you can then do a rebrand to a brand new domain.
Okay.
Right? So we've had quite a few times where we bought let's say the domain of a restaurant. All right. Okay. Then we've gotten content on it, we make it rank, and then we rebrand it and basically 301 that domain to a brand new domain with a super brandable domain name, right? Now, what will happen is generally all your rankings will transfer, right? So you typically don't lose rankings if you're 301 on a page-by-page level the right way around, right? So that way you can still get all the value of all the links from the expired domain or the H domain, and you can then end up with a more brandable domain itself, right? Now, what I would recommend is to do that, we typically get it up running, we get a good bit of content, get 100 posts on it, get a good bit of traffic and so on before we do the rebrand. But that's totally doable. That's totally doable.
Okay, so when you buy an H domain and build a money site, how do you take care of the lead pages which are getting backlinks? Do you redirect them to homepage? You recover them? What do you do?
Yeah, it depends. If we can see that there's some, we prefer domains generally where most links are going to the front page.
Okay.
If we see the sub pages that have a lot of links, we would often recreate those pages, right? So in many cases, we would go in and recreate those pages. And that, we often wouldn't recreate them with the old content, but we would often recreate them with some new content that's more in line. Obviously, sometimes you might be able to 301. You wouldn't necessarily just 301 everything to the front page because, again, that can do things with your anchor text and all this kind of stuff. But we might be able to 301 a subpage to another subpage that we want to rank that's relevant to that subpage, right? So that's an option. But in most cases, we generally look for domains where most of the links are to the front page.
Okay, sorry. So like, do you build links as well?
Do what now?
Do you build links as well? Like if you build a multi-site link building?
Yeah, we do occasionally. Yeah. Depends again. Like if we have an expired domains that's really powerful, we often wait quite a while with building links because an H domain that have a bunch of links will often give you a lot of the link building that you normally need to do, right? So obviously links are expensive. So if we can heavily limited our amount of spending on links and just focus on content, that is, yeah, well, that's super valuable, right? So we do that a lot, yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. So okay, so I have like I think one or two questions only left. So it's about the three zone technique. Like, do you like use the three zone acquisition technique, or what's the process of three zone?
So generally what you want to do is you generally, so if you're merging two pages, for example, so let's say you have two pages that are both about home improvement. If you're merging those two pages, you want to do it on a page-by-page basis, right? So if you have a page that already have a bunch of content that's making money, you want to move that into another page. You generally want to you want to put those individual pages into the same, and you want to actually trio one on a page-by-page level, right? I've seen sometimes where people just take an entire website and trio one that to the front page of another website, and that's often not a good strategy. So you want to do it on a page-by-page level. Now, often the most difficult one is often the front page. So what many people would do is they would take one front page and trio one that to another front page. And again, that can sometimes be difficult, particularly if your current front page is ranking, because what will happen is if you do that, you will totally screw up the anchor text and the anchor text ratio and so on that you have right now. So what you often want to do with the front page is you want to create a separate page on your site that actually have the topic or the title of that page, and then you really want to trio one the old front page to that page instead, right?
Okay, that's really nice. Max, okay, there's one more question regarding three zone one. Like, how many three zone like you prefer to do to one website? Like, do you have any numbers?
We have no limits.
Okay, yeah. So like, yeah, Bushwick also said the same thing. Like, as long as like you are doing it a very natural way, like you can do as many as possible, right?
I mean, that there's business out there that will literally go and buy 100 other companies. So I don't see any natural limits. I don't see any reason to have limits on how many sites you can merge or combine and so on.
Okay, so basically this is a bit like you can only do 2 or 3 redirects, right? You can just do as many as like, yeah, that's interesting. So so like Matt, what do you think about the future of niche domains for SEO? Like after a few years, do you think they are still going to work?
I think they're still working. I think they're. As I said, I mean, you can always go do a rebrand, or you can go do something else if you're afraid of what it will look like and all this sort of stuff. But I mean, I've seen no indications the last 5+ years why it should stop working. So yeah, I still see it working in the foreseeable future. And reality is, I mean, again, I go back to this thing that it's all about great content, right? Google don't generally have a big problem with your ranking if you're showing the best content.
Yeah, that's
Right?
true.
Now, if you're doing crappy spam and you're ranking really good, yes, Google will more likely have a problem with your ranking, and they will then have a reason to actually do something about it. But if you have extremely good if you have the best search result out there, Google generally have a lot less of a problem showing you on the top of the search engines, right? So having really, really solid content just removes most of the reason for Google to negatively impact your site, right?
Yeah, that's true. I also think like age domains are going to be like working in the future as well because this is quite natural as well. Like you are just rebranding your website, right? So yeah, that's just right. Nice. So yeah, so this last question. So what's your best advice for someone who is investing in age domains?
The best advice, well, basically listen to all the stuff I said in the beginning. Just yeah, make sure you get the right domains and so on, and again, just get moving, right? I for me, SEO used to be content and links. I know a lot of people see all this technical stuff, and there is a lot of stuff you can do. But if you look at the 80/20, it's content and links, right? Now, the benefit with H domains is that they kind of take a lot of the links piece away, which means you can really focus on just on content and really building up. Obviously, around content, I mean, you both have internal links and there's a few other things, but if you really, really focus on just the content piece and really make a lot of exceptionally good content and use it on H domains, like you're generally gonna have a great time, right?
Yeah, that's true. Okay. Okay, yeah. So Max, yeah, it was like really nice. Like I really loved like all your answers. I really appreciate. It was totally like great talking to you. So in our audience, like if someone wants to reach out to you, so like how they can contact you, can you share something?
Yeah, I mean, so my main website or one of my businesses is mattsingers.com, and basically what I help a lot of people, a lot of SEOs with is really how to grow and scale their company through effective people management, right? Because reality is that most people don't know how to manage people well. Most people start a SEO company, they start hiring people, and they're all like, "Oh, these outsourced people doesn't work," and you know. But reality is, in most cases, it's actually lack of management skills and so on that's the biggest differentiator, right? So I've worked with many of the big guys in the SEO industry and help them become better people managers, and it makes such a big difference if you know how to work with people effectively, right?
Okay, so like how can they reach out to you? Like can they like message you on
So,
Facebook or email
I
you?
mean, I'd say my website is a great way. You can also find me on Facebook, on LinkedIn. Matt Singers is, I'm the only person in the world with that name, and it is my name. And yeah, you can find me anywhere on social media and so on my website as well. So yeah.
Okay, man. Like that's great. That's great. Like I'm sure like people will reach out to you. Right. So everyone, yeah, thank you so much for watching this interview. I hope you enjoyed it. Like Mads and I have like a great time talking to each other. So if you have any questions, you can just drop in the comments and just hit a like to this video. And if you want, you can just subscribe to the channel. And we will see you in the next interview series. So Mads, like I will like see you later. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much,
Listen,
Sumit.
yeah. Thank you.
Have a good
Bye.
one.